In the late 16th century, the dream of establishing an English presence in the New World turned into one of the most enduring nightmares in history. In 1587, 115 men, women, and children landed on Roanoke Island, in present-day North Carolina, hoping to build a new life. Among them was Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, a symbol of purity and future. However, the colony was born under the sign of precariousness. Governor John White, Virginia's grandfather, was forced to return to England shortly after to request urgent supplies. He left behind his family and an anxious group of settlers, unaware that a war between England and Spain would block his return for 3 long years. What should have been a brief relief trip became an agonizing wait as the Atlantic and fate conspired to erase Roanoke from the map. When John White finally managed to anchor his ship off the coast of Roanoke in August 1590, the scene awaiting him was not one of obvious death, but of an absolute and disturbing absence. There was no smoke rising from chimneys, no voices of children playing, no sound of tools hitting wood. The colony was deserted. Upon landing, White found the houses carefully dismantled, not destroyed, suggesting that the settlers' departure had not been the result of a sudden violent attack. However, the detail that chilled the governor's blood was a solitary inscription carved into a wooden post of the palisade, the word CROATOAN. Additionally, the letters CRO were carved into a nearby tree. It was a message left behind, a code promising an answer, but one that would end up becoming one of humanity's greatest enigmas. The word CROATOAN referred to a neighboring island and the tribe that inhabited it, led by Chief Manteo, who was considered an ally of the English. Before leaving, White had instructed the settlers that if they had to abandon the island under duress or danger, they should carve a Maltese cross above the name of their destination. But there was no cross. The silence of that empty palisade indicated that the departure was planned, or perhaps that the danger was of a nature that did not allow for the use of sacred symbols. White tried to sail to CROATOAN Island in search of his family, but a violent storm and the loss of his anchors forced him to return to England, leaving behind the mystery that would consume him for the rest of his days. He never saw his granddaughter or any other member of the lost expedition again. The first and most obvious theory regarding the fate of Roanoke is that of a massacre. Many historians suggest that the settlers, weakened by hunger and lack of resources, were attacked by hostile tribes who saw the European presence as a growing threat. The absence of bodies, however, is the strongest argument against this hypothesis. At that time, massacres left trails of destruction, burned houses, and skeletal remains. At Roanoke, everything seemed systematically cleared away. This raises the possibility that the settlers integrated with native peoples out of survival necessity. Later stories of Native Americans with blue eyes and fair hair who spoke archaic English and possessed European agricultural knowledge fueled the romantic hope that Virginia Dare's descendants continued to live through the blood of the Croatoan and Lumbee tribes. Another investigative branch focuses on the Dare Stone, an artifact found in 1937 supposedly carved by Eleanor, Dare herself, Virginia's mother. The stone describes a grim fate, successive massacres, disease, and the death of almost all the settlers, including Eleanor's husband and daughter. Although the authenticity of many subsequent stones has been proven fraudulent, the first stone is still a subject of intense debate among experts. It paints a picture of absolute despair, where the American dream was buried in mud and blood beneath the virgin forest canopy. If the stone is real, it is the final testament of a mother watching her civilization collapse in a territory that refused to be conquered, turning the word Croatoan into an epitaph for a lonely tragedy. Recently, the use of high-tech archaeology and satellite mapping has brought new clues. Researchers identified a patch on an old map drawn by John White, the Virginia Pars. Beneath a paper correction, they discovered the symbol of a star-shaped fort, located about 50 miles away from Roanoke at a place called Site X. Excavations in this area revealed fragments of 16th century English pottery, suggesting that a small group of settlers may have moved inland, trying to establish a new outpost while awaiting whites' return. But again, the evidence is sparse and does not explain the fate of the majority of the 115 individuals. It seems that Roanoke split into fragments, each vanishing in a different direction, as if the land itself were trying to dilute its presence. The geographic isolation of Roanoke acted as a catalyst for psychological despair. Imagine the silence of the nights on that island, surrounded by an impenetrable forest and a sea that seemed to have forgotten your existence. The tension between the desire to maintain European identity and the need to become wild to survive must have created devastating internal conflicts. Some suggest the colony succumbed to an internal civil war, where factions fought over scarce resources before being finally eliminated by the environment. The word CROATOAN might not have been a destination, but a warning or a cry for help against something the settlers encountered in the depths of the island, something that colonial logic could not process or describe. There is also the possibility of external political intervention. Spain, at war with England, had obvious interests in eliminating any rival colony. Spanish ships patrolled the coast and could have discovered and eliminated the settlers to ensure the territory remained under their control. However, Spanish records from the time mention the search for the English colony but do not confirm its destruction. This places Roanoke in a political limbo, a forgotten pawn on a global board whose sacrifice was never officially recorded. The disappearance thus becomes a propaganda tool or a bureaucratic error amidst the great empires fighting for hegemony in the New World. The psychology of fear in Roanoke is what resonates most today. The CROATOAN mystery has become an archetype of the fear of being forgotten. The idea that an entire group of people can simply evaporate without a physical trace is an affront to our modern need for closure and explanation. Roanoke reminds us that nature is indifferent to our plans and that civilization is but a thin layer of organization over primordial chaos. The colony's disappearance was the first major reminder to European colonizers that America was not a land of milk and honey, but a vast, ancient, and dangerous continent capable of digesting entire cultures in just 3 years of neglect. Many supernatural enthusiasts point out that Roanoke Island possesses a peculiar energy, associating the disappearance with local legends about spirits that manifest in the mist. Although science dismisses these explanations, folklore is a vital part of how we process the inexplicable. The story of CROATOAN has been absorbed into popular culture, appearing in books and series as a phenomenon that transcends time. For the region's ancient inhabitants, the disappearance could be seen as spiritual retribution for trespassing on sacred lands. This perspective, while not based on material facts, helps fill the void left by the lack of archaeological evidence, turning the case into a secular urban legend that refuses to die. Today, when we visit the Fort Raleigh National Historic Site, what we find is a reconstruction of earthworks and a forest that has reclaimed what belonged to it. The atmosphere is one of heavy stillness, where every tree seems to hold a secret. The search for answers continues with the DNA of modern descendants and new excavations on neighboring islands. Science is slowly trying to rebuild the puzzle, but the core of the mystery remains untouched. What happened to Virginia Dare and the other families is a question that may never have a single answer. Roanoke was not just a colony. It was a human experiment that failed in the most enigmatic way possible, leaving us with the thankless task of interpreting marks on a wooden post. Analyzing the documents of the time, we realize that the Roanoke tragedy was largely the result of an extreme logistical and political failure. Had Queen Elizabeth I not been so concerned with the Spanish Armada, the supply ship would have arrived on time, and Roanoke might have been the first permanent city in English America. World history would have been drastically different. But what-ifs do not build civilizations. What remained was silence and the word CROATOAN, a symbol of our own fragility before the gears of time and war. Roanoke is the scar on America's foundation, a reminder that every great nation begins with the mystery of those left behind in the dark. The true face of the Roanoke mystery lies in our inability to accept a disappearance without a grand motive. Perhaps the truth is much simpler, a mix of hunger, forced integration, and small conflicts that, over 1,000 days, reduced a colony to nothing. But simplicity does not satisfy human curiosity. We want to believe that something extraordinary happened, that they found a new path or were taken by forces beyond our understanding. The lost colony became the mirror of our own anxieties about isolation and the unknown. As long as the word CROATOAN is engraved in collective memory, Roanoke will continue to be the beacon pointing to the limits of our own history. Today, the mystery of Roanoke remains a shadow over American history, a chapter that begins with hope and ends with a question mark carved into wood. The island continues to be a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the price of the New World. Virginia Dare, the child who never grew up in history's records, has become the spirit of Roanoke, a constant reminder that the future can be erased before it even begins. If you felt drawn by this trail of cold smoke in the North Carolina forest and wish to explore other secrets that the earth insists on keeping, subscribe and follow our next investigations. Mystery is the only thing that truly survives time.